What happens when the lines between love, adoration, and ownership get completely erased? When the person who promises to be your safe harbor becomes the storm you can't escape? We're always told that love shouldn't hurt, that it's a partnership built on trust and respect. But for some, that fairy tale romance slowly and almost silently twists into a waking nightmare. It might start with a text that feels a little too demanding, or a question about where you are that sounds more like an interrogation. And it can end in a way nobody sees coming, even though, looking back, the signs were there all along. This is a story about that pattern. It's a story that pieces together the all-too-common fragments of control, jealousy, and possessiveness that build toward an explosive and ultimately tragic ending.
When the call for help finally comes, it isn't from a panicked victim. It's from the perpetrator. The voice on the other end is often chillingly calm. They don't scream for help or ask for an ambulance. They make a statement, a confession, delivered with the cold finality of a business deal. In many of these cases, they've already called the victim's family to announce what they've done. A romance that started with so much promise ends in a single, irreversible act of violence. But how does any relationship get to this terrifying breaking point? To understand the end, you have to go back to the beginning.
To illustrate how this happens, let's use a hypothetical story of a couple we'll call Jenna and Mark. For 22-year-old Jenna, meeting Mark felt like something out of a movie. He was charming, attentive, and completely magnetic. From the very first date, he seemed captivated by her, showering her with compliments and making her feel like the absolute center of his universe. Friends and family thought he was perfect. He was the kind of boyfriend who sent flowers to her job for no reason and was always the first to text in the morning and the last to say goodnight. Their romance moved incredibly fast. Within weeks, they were inseparable. Mark was already talking about a future, and Jenna, swept up in the intensity of it all, felt like she'd finally found her soulmate. He'd say things like, "I've never felt this way about anyone before, and my life didn't really start until I met you." This level of adoration is intoxicating. Criminologists have identified this as a common first stage in dangerous relationships, a commitment whirlwind designed to lock a partner in quickly. For a while, their life was a blur of happy moments, but even in these early days, the first signs of a gathering storm were starting to form, so subtle they were almost invisible.
As time went on, the nature of Mark's affection began to change. The constant attention that once felt amazing started to feel suffocating. It began with the messages. "Where are you? Who are you with? Why aren't you answering me?" The texts would blow up her phone, a relentless stream of questions. If she was out with friends, he needed constant updates. If she didn't reply within minutes, he'd call, his tone laced with an anxiety that felt more like an accusation. Soon his jealousy, which he'd once passed off as being protective, took on a sharper edge. He started criticizing her friends, suggesting they were a bad influence. He'd make comments about her male coworkers, planting seeds of doubt. This is a classic tactic of what experts call coercive control, isolation. The abuser systematically works to cut off their partner's support system, making themselves the only person the victim can turn to. Jenna found herself canceling plans just to avoid a fight with Mark. Her world, once vibrant and full, started shrinking until he was all that was left. Then things took an even darker turn as psychological manipulation escalated into outright surveillance. He'd casually ask for her phone password to look something up, then use it later to read her private messages. He seemed to know things she hadn't told him, and it was disorienting and terrifying. His need for control became absolute. He started telling her what she could wear and who she could see. Love had turned into a cage, and Jenna was starting to feel the walls closing in. The passion had curdled into possession. The breaking point isn't always one big event, but the weight of 1,000 small cuts. For a person in Jenna's situation, it might be something as small as a casual comment. In our example, a remark from her brother about an old friend sends Mark into a silent, simmering rage. He doesn't explode at the dinner table, he waits until they're alone, then unleashes a torrent of verbal abuse, accusing her of embarrassing him. In that moment, the illusion shatters. She realizes she isn't his partner, she's his property. Fear finally pushes her to act. She packs a bag while he's at work and goes to stay with her parents, blocking his number and his social media. But for an obsessive controller, a breakup isn't an ending, it's a trigger. The loss of control is intolerable. His behavior escalates dramatically. He shows up at her parents' house and her job. He leaves rambling voicemails, swinging between tearful apologies and menacing threats. This is a terrifyingly common script, a manipulative cycle designed to confuse the victim and wear down their resolve. The man who once claimed he couldn't live without her now makes it clear he won't let her live without him.
Stories like this are deeply unsettling because they reveal how easily love can be twisted into a weapon. If you're finding this breakdown of coercive control valuable and want to understand more about the psychology behind these true crime cases, please consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the notification bell. Your support helps us continue to create this content. This pattern isn't just a hypothetical. It has a real, devastating cost. Now, let's look at the tragic real-life case of 22-year-old Kailee McMullen. She was an EMT, described by those who knew her as a beautiful soul with a passion for helping others. Her father, Ronald McMullen, was known to be extremely controlling, to the point where he would track her phone to monitor her whereabouts. The final act didn't begin with a plea for forgiveness. It ended in an act of ultimate control. In June 2017, Ronald shot Kailee in their family home. The events that followed were chilling and revealing of his mindset. After shooting his daughter, he moved her body and called his wife. Only then did he call 911, not to confess, but to lie, telling dispatchers that Kailee had been playing with a wheel gun and had accidentally shot herself when he tried to take it from her. Blaming the victim or claiming an accident is a common tactic for perpetrators who see their actions as justified. The crime wasn't an act of passion, it was a calculated act of annihilation, the tragic conclusion of a pathological need for control. When police arrived at the scene, Ronald McMullen's story quickly fell apart. The evidence didn't match his claim of an accident. His behavior was bizarre. Officers had to physically restrain him from wiping away blood at the scene. And at one point, he got on the ground outside and began covering himself in dirt. The investigation painted a clear and damning picture. A digital trail of messages and phone records, combined with testimony from friends and family, revealed a disturbing pattern of control and obsession. The case against him was overwhelming. Ronald McMullen was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For the families left behind in cases like these, the aftermath is a life sentence of its own. The grief is compounded by haunting questions and the feeling that they should have done more to intervene. A legal verdict provides a measure of justice, but it can never bring back the person whose future was so violently stolen. Obsession is a dark and distorted mirror of love. It isn't born from affection, but from a desperate need for validation and a pathological fear of being abandoned. It views a partner not as a person, but as a possession to be managed. The stories of women like Kailee McMullen are not just cautionary tales, they are urgent warnings. They remind us that coercive control is a critical red flag for violence, and threats must always be taken seriously. Recognizing the early signs, the intense jealousy, the isolation, the constant monitoring, isn't about being paranoid, it's about being aware. Love should make your world bigger, not smaller. It should build you up,
not break you down. It should feel like freedom, not a cage. If you or someone you know is in a controlling or abusive relationship, please know that help is available. Resources like the National Domestic Violence website provide guidance and support. Don't wait for the situation to escalate. Trust your instincts, and remember, love should never, ever hurt. If you believe it's important to shed light on these cases, please consider subscribing to the channel and liking this video. Your support helps ensure these stories are told and that the victims are never forgotten. And as always, thank you for watching.